Okay, cool, Nate. Thanks for joining me. So I'm gonna give folks just a little background. I was on a group conversation or thread on Reddit around career, and I noticed that Nate had responded to somebody's question about how to find their work or their path, and I just thought his story was fantastic. So I thought I would ask him about it today. So thanks, Nate.
Absolutely, Rob. Thank you for reaching me out and setting up this call. I love to talk about this stuff, so happy to discuss it and chat about it. Yeah. So the that guy on Reddit, I never really followed up with him or anything like that, but his post was essentially, if I can remember, he was going to college, or I think he got the degree in something related to music, or he had some formal training in some instrument, but had all these other different interests and didn't know exactly how to go about getting a job where he could feel satisfied. I think from what I recall, he had this degree that he felt really wasn't doing much legwork in terms of getting him a job. And based on what he was saying, I just got this idea that, he felt like he was at his wit's end with trying to get some scratch going with his passions and stuff. And I think I replied that TLDR, or that little Reddit sort of language where it's too long didn't read.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, I started my post with the too long didn't read, which is just create your own opportunity. You're gonna have to create your own job or create your own thing. And then below that got more into it, where I was explaining to him my story, which was basically kind of similar to his, where, interested in all these things and passionate about all these different things, and no idea how to either A, combine them all, or B, which one should I actually pursue, or C, I'm not getting any job opportunities. And basically my story was just okay, well, I was kind of in a similar boat where I didn't have a degree. I was actually a college dropout.
Yeah, that's right. You mentioned that you left school.
Yes, left school multiple times. I'd go back and then stop going after some time. So it was a little more difficult. But basically, my story was basically trying to tell him you just need to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. It's nobody's going to hand you anything, A, even with a degree. And then B, you're going to have to prove yourself in something at some point to someone, with or without a degree. So if you can create your own sort of opportunity and inroad to do that, that's important, and that's valuable. And then by doing that, you can also feel kind of satisfied if you're taking these passions and turning them into some sort of project that's A, fulfilling you for the time being, but then B, also creating opportunity and expanding your knowledge base and your experience, and something that you can put on a resume that looks really good.
And so when you left school, how did you begin your journey doing that? Because what I hear, and especially on Reddit, what I read from a lot of folks is, I need a solid, tried and true career path with guarantees, or I need a high paying job today. And it sounds like you were willing to try some stuff. So yeah, let's say you just left school. What happened next?
I had a full-time job. I was working in administration for a nonprofit. Wasn't making that much money, nonprofit, and wasn't satisfied at all. So I guess my journey was born out of just knowing that this isn't going to make me happy. I don't want to do this. I'm not passionate about this. It's paying the bills and I get benefits, but I'm the type of person who's not willing to trade in fulfillment and satisfaction just for security. I think a lot of people get caught in that trap.
Yeah, big time.
And big time. I think most people get caught in that trap. So I was like, okay, well, I have a job and I have benefits and I have security, but I still have X amount of hours in the day or the week, and I know this isn't what I want. And I know I don't have a degree, and I was applying, for jobs left and right, and just couldn't get any job. And the other thing was, like, I couldn't find a job that really met my needs in terms of what I wanted to do as a career. So it was either.
So you had an idea. You had an idea of what you were kind of shooting for, or?
Yeah. So, I knew I was passionate about media and like mixed media, whether it was, media on the internet or content marketing or content production or curation or film, anything like that. I was very interested in that. I was very interested in soccer. I was passionate about, economics and business and politics and all sorts of stuff. So I was in the same boat as that guy on Reddit. Like, I have all these interests, but how do I combine them? And I think when you're trying to devour something, a really big problem, you have to take it like one bite at a time. So I started small, and realized, like, okay, so I'm not getting any jobs because I don't have a degree, or, I just didn't do well in an interview. So I'm going to have to try to create something on my own, just, throw something at the wall and see what sticks. So I really enjoyed writing. I really enjoyed film and digital media. So I thought, like, okay, well, in my free time outside of my full-time job, maybe I can do freelance writing. If I have the raw ability to write, maybe I can find like a freelance writing gig.
Wow.
Anybody that, I told this to was like, you're nuts. Like, you don't have a degree. You haven't written since like you were a kid. Like, this, it's not going to work.
But you like it.
But I like it. I love to write and I love film. So I was like, well, let me just try. I don't have anything to lose. So I compiled this spreadsheet of about maybe like 250 emails for any writer in film, for any film website or Hollywood news website that I really liked, or even thought, would look at my email. And this is when, with Gmail, you could still send like a bulk email out to like 250 people and they wouldn't block you or spam it.
Yeah.
So in the email, I kind of just pitched them. This was maybe like 7 years ago. I think like maybe 6-7 years ago. I just wrote like, this is who I am. Like, I'm a good writer. I don't have anything to back that up, but if you just give me a shot, we'll see. I'll work my tail off. And I really just want an opportunity. The 250 people, I'd say 10 got back to me.
Wow.
5 said no, just outright. Yeah, sorry, we can't help you. I'd say 4 gave me like a no, but some advice, which was really nice. And 1 said, we're looking for interns right now. Let's see what you got.
Great.
And, blew my mind.
How'd you find the 250 people?
I spent hours out of the day going through every website that wrote about Hollywood or film or television or media, and compiling, taking their email addresses from either like their about page or their actual like bylines in the articles, and just putting it in Excel.
Got it. Great.
Either like the managers of the site all the way down to individual writers. Just
So that's amazing. So even though it was one email to 250 people and only 10 people, so about what is that, about 0.5%, but you got an opportunity from that one email. That's
yes.
fantastic.
And I couldn't believe it. I remember calling my father on the way home to tell him about it. I was in tears because it was a website that I read frequently. I liked their work. So here's this shot to like do this. I felt on top of the world. So I did that. I wrote for them for about a year.
Wow.
Still held down like my full-time job, but did this on the side. And the opportunities that it gave me, and then the networking opportunities and the knowledge of how this online operation ran and stuff like that, the training, the people I met, was paid dividends. And
So
I think the biggest.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. I think the biggest thing that I got from it was A, the experience, but B, also the confidence that maybe I don't need to finish school. And maybe just with enough, doggedness and grit and perseverance, like, I can create more of these opportunities just by, hitting the pavement and just going for it. Even if it takes like blasting an email out to 250 people. But like you said, that one yes,
that's
changed
huge.
my whole life. Yeah, it's huge.
And what was the work like? Were you writing articles or were you editing or?
So just writing articles. These were short, maybe like 600 word pieces. I think I was doing like 2 per night, which is a lot. I think it was like 600 to like 800 words and 2 articles per night. So you're looking at about like 1,200 to, 3,600 words per night. So I'd come home from work, at like 6 p.m., eat dinner, and then for the next 5-6 hours, just writing.
Wow.
And it sucked because, that was my life. There was no sort of break or anything like that. And, I was tired. And yeah, sometimes I came home and it's like, I don't feel like writing, like 3,600 words, like became a lot. But what was I going to do? Like I had no skin in the game in terms of experience or anything. This was a great opportunity. So,
and then, and so they were basically turning these around and putting them online almost immediately.
Next day.
Wow.
So I'd submit them at night. Yeah. So I'd submit them at night. They wanted both by like midnight, which meant, get home from work at 5 or 6 p.m., crank these out and get them submitted by midnight that night. But the satisfaction in the morning of seeing these published, with thousands of readers was enormous.
Wow. Did you get paid for that?
Pennies. Okay. Pennies.
Okay.
Pennies. In retrospect, it's like, wow, I, probably should have like fought for more. But the opportunity alone is just.
Well, I bet your writing like really got on point after a year. I mean, that's amazing.
With those editors like working with me, my writing definitely improved. I pursued it like a little further after that, but kind of like that guy on Reddit, with multiple interests after that gig, I kind of like moved on because I was like, what other interests can I like do this same thing with, where I kind of create this own opportunity. And that's how some of the other stuff that I mentioned in my Reddit post ended up happening. With soccer, it was like, okay, I really love soccer. I really love media. I have 3 friends here who love soccer just like I do. What if we just start a podcast?
Wow. And so that was the next thing?
That was the next thing. Maybe about 2 years after that writing gig, the podcast was the next thing. And I hit it just as hard as I did that writing stuff. Got us like equipment, researched how to edit podcasts and audio and software, all of that stuff. I just attacked it and went after it. And that was like another opportunity. And we got to do a lot of cool stuff because of that. And it took a lot of hard work and dedication. But again, like it satiated me for that time being. You know, I'm still working, you know, this crappy full-time job I have, but on the side, I'm doing something I love. And yeah, it's taking up all my time, but you know, you never know where it can lead.
And what was the when you started the podcast, what was the pace of that? Like, how often were you guys producing content? And
we were doing about one episode per week, every weekend.
Got it.
Which is kind of like a normal schedule for a more hobbyist sort of podcast. But I was trying to market it as, and this is before I knew as much as I do now about marketing and content and stuff. But I was really trying to push it. You know, we were working Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and, you know, producing the shows and editing the shows and releasing them and stuff. And we had grown it to a point where we were getting press credentials for pro team matches and pro team practices where we would go and interview professional players and watch pro clubs from around the world play. And it was like, yeah, right? So it was, again, just like another confidence boost where it's like, I'm just a kid. I think I was like, I want to say maybe I was like 26 at the time when we first started this, but I'm like, I don't have a degree. You know, I don't have any experience in this medium. This started as a hobby, but with just enough effort and perseverance and blood, sweat, and tears, here I am interviewing professional players who I admire, and getting emails from organizations saying like, yep, pick up your press credentials, you know, we'll mail them to you or pick them up at the front office and come to this match stadium and cover this game from the press box.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so it was nuts. So then the confidence from that just, you know, it skyrockets at that point. At that point, yeah. I feel like I can do anything. And I think it was at that moment, I was like, okay, something's working. You know, none of this is making me money, but I could feel that the ball was rolling. Something eventually is gonna shake loose if I just keep trying these things and working them to see where they lead. And at the same time, it was offsetting how miserable I was at my full-time job.
Yeah.
Which I think was really important.
Got it. Yeah, because it feeds your soul, right? Gives you energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't imagine, you know, being in that office from 9 to 5 and then coming home and just, you know, sitting there the rest of the night watching TV, depressed or, you know, thinking, you know, everything's for nothing and you know, this is what my life is going to be. I think that goes back to that confidence thing. I think once you can see things, you know, moving and the pieces kind of coming together, you kind of get that confidence. Like I can maybe do anything. And
it's amazing. Well, it's amazing. You took two opportunities and kind of grew them into something significant. That's amazing.
Right. Yeah.
So what happened next?
I wanted that podcast to get a lot bigger. So I built us a website on WordPress, and hired soccer writers to start producing written content weekly. And it was a small team of soccer writers, maybe about 4, and they were producing weekly content. And at that point, I was like at a 10. You know, I'm feeling like, you know, I'm busy as heck, you know, 9 to 5 job and then coming home with the podcast and then managing these writers. But I felt like, you know, I felt like I was the biggest thing in the world. even though
Wow.
this is like hardly making a blip on the radar of anything. How I felt about myself had been better than I had ever felt about myself in my entire life.
Mm.
And then we're producing soccer content, and then that lasted maybe a month, and I was happy with it. But then I wanted more, and I was like, well, this is going great, but what about like my interest in film and politics and music and all this other stuff? So I had contacted this guy who I found who had editorial experience in managing websites, news websites. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to create an independent news site that covers sports, politics, film, music, and pop culture and culture. For maybe 4 or 5 writers per topic and weekly content. And he was like, okay, like, who are you and what experience do you have doing this? I said, I don't have any, but
you did actually. Yeah.
kind of did. I had enough experience
Yeah.
that I was confident that I could pull this off. And he was like, okay, like, we can do this, but you have to build a website for it. We have to hire writers, get an editorial board, like all this stuff. And I was like, okay, like that's fine. And he said, when do you want to do this by? When do you want this launched? And I said, I want to do it in a month. And he was like, okay, so you want about 15 writers, 5 topics, weekly articles, and an entire website and brand in 1 month. And I said, yeah. I was like, that's exactly it. And he said, okay, well, nobody can ever tell you you're not ambitious. And I screenshotted that conversation with him when he said that, because it really resonated with me, because, here he was saying, like, this is crazy, but if you think you can pull this off with my help, then I think you're crazy, but I'll sign up with you. Like, nobody can ever call you ambitious. And I think that had really stuck with me, because so many people had told me no up to that point, in terms of things that I wanted to do, because, I didn't have a degree or didn't have the experience with something. And I started to really hate hearing no, or being told that I can't do something.
I got to close the window because there's a helicopter going by.
No, absolutely.
Sorry about that.
Is anything I'm saying good content? Like,
it's amazing, actually, except I've got about 3 hours of questions, but we're getting the overview.
All right,
So was he going to fund it, or he was going to partner with you? Was it what was his role? Was it access?
He was going to help me. He was basically going to be a deputy editor if I was the editor-in-chief. He was going to work with the writers around the WordPress platform if they didn't have experience. He was going to edit the articles. He was going to scout potential talent for us to hire. I bootstrapped the entire operation myself.
Wow.
I was that passionate about it. He was being paid. So we had a month, about a month to launch this. So
you paid him. You paid him?
He was being paid weekly to help me with this. So
great.
We had a month. So he got to work on hiring writers. He'd vet them and interview them, and then I'd say yes or no to their final hire and stuff. And we would explain to them, the vision, stuff like that. And it was at that point with this project, this news website, that I was taking every single experience that I had ever had up to that point with things that I had done outside of my full-time job, my writing experience, learning how an online news blog or news website operates, digital media with the podcast, managing a small team of soccer writers. I was taking all of that and referencing that experience to make this new project work. So I built the website. We hired the writers. I put together this 10-page style guide that outlined, it was like followed like the APA style very closely. And I pretty much went back to that film website I had freelanced for and kind of took their style guide that I had to learn as inspiration. So I'm pulling from all these different facets of my life to create this one thing. And I think that was one of the driving points I was trying to make to that guy on Reddit. Like all these little projects that I had done on the side that may, independently didn't amount to much. All those experiences came together for this one massive thing. And I think that's what I was trying to drive to him. So we launched in January on time, and we started, publishing content left and right. All the marketing was done by myself, but we grew from I want to say in maybe 5 months, we grew from 100 readers a week to nearly, I want to say 10,000 per week. I think we hit our peak in April. Totally independent operation.
Wow.
I bootstrapped the whole thing, and no advertising, no paid media or anything like that. To 10,000 readers per week, and syndicated by Google News and Apple News. So if you went on the Google News app or Apple News app, you'd see our site sitting there right next to Vox or Vulture or BuzzFeed, depending on the topic. And that was incredible. That was
It was the
craziest thing I'd ever done in my life. I was up until 4 a.m. every night because I'd come home from work and then going through all the articles and making edits and just managing the operations of it. It was exhausting. So I wouldn't go to bed until 4 a.m. and then be up for work 7. My parents were super concerned. My friends were super concerned, you're going to burn yourself out. But seeing this thing grow, and we started getting interviews with music artists and stuff, because I would just reach out to PR firms to try to book interviews with our music writers, with musicians. I was just trying to. This thing was my baby, so I dumped every ounce of effort I had into it. But then, just as everyone had predicted, I burned out.
Good. Did you get some rest?
Yeah, I finally got some rest. We launched in January, and I got so burnt out that by June I had to shut it down. The site's still live, but I was exhausted. I had to shut it down. I was so tired.
So you shut it down. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I shut operations down. We didn't do any more active publishing. I kept the site live because I'm still extremely proud of it, and it still gets really good traffic to this day.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was 2018. And then I took a very long break.
And recuperated.
Yeah.
Cool. And what's going on now?
I went back to the full-time job, kind of feeling my tail was in between my legs. And I don't think I pursued any sort of side project for a long time. And this was 2018. So I went back to sort of applying for jobs, doing the career-minded thing. And, I did that for about 2 years, trying to apply for an actual job. Because that news website didn't make me a dime. So I was I can't keep doing this. At some point, something's got to shake loose here. But I think a year after that news website, someone was like, hey, I saw that you built this news website and stuff. Did you build the website itself as well? And I was like, yeah, I did. And they were like, do you do WordPress development? And I was like, I can put something together. And they were like, well, I'm looking for something really cheap. And I said, okay, I'm confident I can do it. And I was like, a few extra bucks on the side for something easy. So I did that. And then they referred me to someone else to build someone else's website. And then I kept doing that for a while. And then I started getting more and more clients through word of mouth.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, maybe we're back onto something here in terms of like building these WordPress websites. And I worked that angle for about a year. So like all through 2019, I was trying to build anybody's website for them, you know, on WordPress and stuff. And I got really good at it. And then I took like the marketing experience that I had gotten from that news website and the podcast and started to kind of like branch out. Like, hey, I can build you a WordPress website, but I can also manage like your social media and like do some SEO work. And that was what I had kind of scraped together on the side outside of my full-time job for a while. And then I got good enough and I had enough clients that in August this past year, September this past year, I quit my full-time job. And now I do this full-time. I appreciate that.
Wow.
So yeah, now I mostly do SEO work for agencies and businesses all over the States. And there's an agency in the UK that contracts me.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm curious, was there a reason why you didn't try to monetize, or did you try to monetize the podcast or the news site?
Yeah, both were, that's a great question. Both were goals of mine. The podcast was tough. Monetizing a podcast is extremely difficult. We tried like the merchandising angle. We had stickers and stuff and, beanies. It's so hard to monetize a podcast. That sort of space is so oversaturated because anybody can start a podcast. So it's very hard to monetize a podcast. And then the website, the news website, we started running Google ads at one point. Not making that much money. I'd say maybe like $10, $20 a month. But had I stuck with it, 2 years, like if I had stuck with it an additional 2 years up to this point, I think especially knowing what I know now about digital marketing and SEO work, I probably could have blown it up to a much bigger level and made decent, side income from it. So I gave it a shot. I gave monetization a shot, but it wasn't really in the cards at that time.
Got it. Well, this is amazing. This is an incredible story. And it's still going. Well, let me see here. I think that's a good breaking point. And but I will tell you that I'll probably ask you to do a follow-up, because the questions that I want to ask now are kind of like the next level of question. Like you were saying in numerous times that an earlier experience gave you the confidence to do that.
Right.
And I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, because people read their experiences differently. And we could take someone else and give them the same experiences and they would make a different meaning out of it, and they might not move forward. But the consistent thing is you took each experience and said, oh, I can do this, now I can do that. Right. So I would love to dig into that a little bit more, because I think that could be really useful to folks as well.
I think that's, I can answer this,
let's start. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing. I think people, it's not binary. It's not, well, I did this one thing, but it exists in a vacuum, or, nothing is ever going to come from this one experience, however random or unrelated it is to, anything else. I think seeing an experience and being like, okay, well, I learned something, I tried something, and, it satisfied me. I think that's great, but you can't just walk away from that. especially if you're trying to, pursue your passions or create something for yourself, a life for yourself. I think any opportunity, you just never know what it's going to lead to. My father's an entrepreneur. So while he was seeing me do what to him and my mom made no sense whatsoever, like our 25-year-old son is just doing whatever, he knew, like, at the end of the day, all of this is connected somehow. And he would tell me, like, you don't know what this is going to lead to. Like, I love what you're doing. I may not understand it, but I kind of get it. And one day, all these little random experiences and projects, they're going to get you somewhere. Something's going to click. And I wish more people realized that. And I wish more people were less scared to just try something. I think that's the biggest thing, is that people are either, afraid of failure, and because of that, they're scared to at least just try and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that's what really struck me when I read what you had written on Reddit, because you're willing to try things. And even what you were just saying now, what I heard is, you said, if I try something, I'm going to learn something.
Right.
Most people have it, if I try and I don't make a ton of money, then I've failed.
Right.
Right. And they actually do that preemptively very often in their head. They're like, wow, a podcast, that's not going to pay the bills, so why bother? But you're like, let's see what I can learn there.
Hearing you even say that, like, pains me, because I hear it so often from people, and it's frustrating because it's like, again, it's not binary. It's not pass or fail. It's not make money or don't. It's so much more nuanced. Even, okay, so I never was able to monetize the podcast. It's still live. I mean, we still do it. We try to do it once a weekend, but it's definitely not what it used to be. I wasn't able to monetize the website. I didn't, end up as a freelance writer. None of that ended up working out. But I could never sit here and say they were failures.
Because they weren't. I mean, they were incredible successes, right?
So sure, like, the goals that I initially had for them, I didn't meet those goals. But what I was able to get, walking away from them, that experience and those networking opportunities and that confidence, that matters. That matters arguably more, than anything else may have mattered. So people who are in a similar position shouldn't do that preemptive thinking where it's like, well, unless this, takes over and blows up and makes me money, it's just not worth pursuing. I think that's extremely, like, self-destructive, especially if you continue to, like, internalize that sort of thought process. Then you're going to look at any opportunity as, well, if I fail or it doesn't do what I initially wanted to do, then, I just lose. And I think that's harmful.
Yeah, it's really, well, it's debilitating in a way, because people they're not trying something in experience. Right. And one thing that I, very often I say to folks is, you're trying to answer questions in your head that need to be answered in the world a little bit. Like you need to go out and try them and see what happens. The other thing that you said that really hit me is you have this belief that these different elements will work together. And I think a lot of times someone says, oh, I like writing and I like soccer, which should I pursue? And they create a tension between them. Right. Instead of having a belief of, I don't know how they're going to fit together, but I have an idea that they probably can.
Right.
Right. Which it seems like you have that belief. Yeah.
It was, every, like, company was turning me down, no matter how many resumes I submitted or working on my interview skills or anything like that. And then, like you said, it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Like apply to a, US Soccer Federation with no experience? Or, am I going to try to be like it became, and I think because of that, I'm sure there were times where I felt, and I know there were times where I felt that this was it. I was just going to not do anything because, and I think you get like, analysis paralysis where too much is going on and you just overthink everything. And then, when you compound that by the fact that nothing's working out, I know that there were times where I was extremely upset and down and really felt lost. And I think when the chips are down that much, you really only have two choices. You either kind of just accept it and not do anything, or you go out there and you really try to figure it out, by any means necessary. Failure or not failure. I think in that case, it is binary. I think in that situation, I think it is binary. You either accept your circumstances and accept, how things are, or you change them. And I think that's really it. But if you are going to try to change them, you have to be consistent, and you can't give up. I mean, the journey that I was telling you and I was outlining him on Reddit or her on Reddit was, I'm 30 now. That was a 7-year journey with more failures and more heartbreak and depression and grief than there were successes and feelings of elation and confidence. So it's definitely not easy by any means. But I'm sitting here today, like, it was 1000% worth it. No matter how many times I thought this is for nothing, or this is awful, or nothing's ever going to change.
It's interesting. I did some modeling. By modeling, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but sort of figuring out how people do what they do. It comes from, I have a background in NLP, and NLP was sort of born out of modeling and figuring out how people do what they do. But I modeled this woman who was, an amazing entrepreneur and incredibly successful. And she would do these things that from the outside seemed to make no sense. Like at one point she left her job. She got her husband to leave his job, and they picked up the family and moved to Dubai. And she took a job. And I said, how could you do that? And how could you convince your husband to do that? And she also had parents who were entrepreneurs. And she said, you get good at taking risks. Like, you'll land on your feet. She's like, if it fails, I'll just do something else. And then she broke it down for me and why it was a good decision and why it made all the sense in the world, even for her husband.
Right.
And it was incredible. But she's like, oh, I can start 10 companies. She's like, I've done it before. She said also she had a thing about changing because she would get bored. Like as soon as the challenge was gone, she felt like she was done. But that was like a little thing that kept moving her forward.
Right. So I think this is where it does get tricky, because I don't think everyone is quite built that way. Yep. And I do think it's hard to learn. I know I get it from my father. I'm much more, I take a lot of risks. Anytime I try to pursue something, it's like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll teach myself something else and I'll be fine. In a very similar way to her, I think it does come down to that sort of entrepreneurial mindset where you're extremely self-reliant. You're very confident, and risks, if the reward outweighs the level of risk and you can try to like mitigate as much risk as possible, then, absolutely go for it. But then there's other risks where it's like, this is probably not going to work out, but I want to try it. And if it doesn't, I'll just figure something else out. And that boredom thing I think you see that a lot with people who do what they do in this sort of niche or industry. They get bored very easily, and unless they're being challenged, they will either look for a new challenge or try to create a new challenge for themselves. I think people who are more risk averse maybe can learn that way of operating, but there's so many people who, the first thing they want is, those benefits and that job security and that sort of routine where it's, I can wake up, go to work, come home and, enjoy my family or wife or kids or husband or spouse or my hobbies. And that's it. And I'm content with that. So I don't think everybody's the same necessarily, but I think people maybe can change the way they operate to sort of operate how that woman you had modeled operates.
Yeah. No, I think people, I don't know if it's nature, nurture, there are definite different dispositions out there, but I've seen enough people shift that to know that people can change it. You develop a tolerance for change. I mean, it's horrible what the world is going through right now in terms of COVID, but we're all learning, for better or for worse, to deal with change because it was forced in our lap, right? So
absolutely,
people are getting a reference experience to that, and everyone's learning how to communicate online, right? Like all these people who never went online are now online. So there's a lot of people are getting better at change, whether they like it or not at this moment in time,
And I think you bring up a really good point, because I think you have a lot of people out there right now who are being forced to go through this change. They may either, not really be aware of it. They're kind of just like adapting whatever circumstances their job or company is making them adapt to, or they may not like it. And then there's a third sort of group of people who are seeing this change happen. And they're like, wait a minute, I can work from home doing this. This is giving me some new freedom. Maybe I can take my job and step outside and work independently as a contractor. I think or maybe not necessarily that, but I do think you have this group of people right now who are going through this change because of COVID, who are thinking like, okay, this is interesting. What other opportunities could come from this change?
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people, anybody out there who's really questioning like the why and the how, and like poking this sort of, nebulous thing where it's like, I like this change. Where can I take this, or where can this lead? I think is fantastic. Because as much as, 2020 has been unfortunate for a lot of people, I quit my job, my full-time job in 2020, and now I'm an independent contractor.
Wow.
So 2020 has been pretty good to me personally.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, I think people are going through this change right now. But I think there's opportunity there that didn't exist before.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that change is always good and that it's easy or any of those things. Like a lot of people are going through difficult change right now, but the one thing is people are getting through it, so that's great.
Yeah, I think
well, this is,
go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just saying this is fantastic. I love hearing your story. I'm glad that I stumbled on it there.
Yeah, on Reddit of all places.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So you said the new site is still up, so maybe that's something I can put in the notes so people can take a look at that if it's still up there.
Yeah,
I can. And
I'll email you
podcast.
links to both the podcast and like the iTunes page, and then I'll email a link for the website. I think you brought up a good point there with adapting to change. I think resilience is really underrated. I think people are going to come into 2021 a lot stronger and a lot smarter and a lot more capable of, I guess, like self-realization and resilience. And I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, and it's not something that you can necessarily sell someone on ahead of time. But now that everyone, I was reflecting on this the other day, everybody's gone through massive changes right now. Everybody. So that like a nice fringe benefit of that is realizing that luckily many people survived, and that's fantastic. And
absolutely,
so really cool,
100%.
really cool, and something that people can learn from. Okay, I have some chicken marinating, so I've got to go cook that. But
absolutely.
Nate, thank you. This is awesome, and I hope we can talk again.
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to. I hope I didn't rant and ramble too much. I know I have
no, this is fantastic.
A ramble. So I hope this helps, your viewership and your clients, even a little bit. So I appreciate you having me on. I love to talk about this stuff, not selfishly, but out of a place of just, wanting to see more people do this, and chase what they want to chase and be successful.
Yeah, I'm curious if we can put it on that Reddit page, because I don't quite understand the guidelines of the different groups. Sometimes I try to post and it'll get taken down, but I mean, this would be a great talk to put up there. So
right. No, absolutely. Try to post it. If our replies are already on there, so it's probably okay if you throw that link up there. I don't think they take it down.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right, great.
All right.
So thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Rob. I appreciate it.
All right. Let's see.